Joining me now is Congressman Adam Schiff. He was an impeachment manager during Donald Trump's first impeachment trial and was a member of the House Select Committee on January 6th. Congressman Schiff, thank you so much for joining me on Labor Day weekend.
Great to be with you.
You followed this all so closely, given all of your various roles on in Congress. Were you all surprised as you were watching Mark Meadows' testimony of anything he had to say on Monday?
Not surprised so much by what he had to say as the fact that he said it at all, that he felt the need to take that gamble, that big gamble, by taking the stand. I think it's an indication both of the fact that he feels he needs some kind of a Hail Mary to escape a potential conviction, but also that if he were successful in removing the case to federal court, he has the potential to knock it out completely by arguing immunity. But, listening to that testimony, reading what he had to say, I think it's a very weak case, both for removal but also for immunity. If actions of a chief of staff to try to subvert an election, to try to overturn an election, to try to defraud and violate the laws of a particular state are somehow within the job description of a federal chief of staff, then the Constitution becomes, in Justice Jackson's words, a suicide pact. And as he wrote in that dissent, that famous dissent, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It shouldn't be interpreted in such a way as it would negate itself. But I think he feels it necessary to take such a profound risk with his testimony.
Well, given, as you just said, a profound risk that he took by testifying for more than 4 hours, that now can all be used by other prosecutors. Did you hear anything that might be useful for Jack Smith and his team as they're working to put together their case in their case in prosecuting the federal election interference case?
Mostly the absurdity of the argument that he did this as part of his role in order to determine what further reforms might be necessary to election laws or to see that the election law was faithfully carried out. That, I think, will be very successfully mocked during the course of the trial. And it should be. It's absurd. But I think he was, by and large, pretty careful about what he was saying, using, repetitive words and phrases, no doubt counseled by his attorney. But just the absurdity of the argument, I think, will ultimately be used against him.
Yes, it's such a good point. It's worth telling everybody, reminding everybody, it is not your role as the White House Chief of Staff to work to overturn an election, to state the obvious. One of the things, Congressman, that stood out to me was when Meadows was asked directly by state prosecutors if he had any role in coordinating the fake electors. He said, "No, I did not." The prosecution then submitted into evidence an email that Meadows sent to Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller, where he wrote, quote, "We just need to have someone coordinating the electors for states." I mean, you've been in a range of positions in these courtrooms. Did he perjure himself there, or how problematic is that for him?
I think it's very problematic, and it could be even more problematic if there's other evidence that prosecutors produce of his role in the fake elector plot. This is why most attorneys would have counseled against him testifying, other than as a last resort, because he isn't completely familiar with the discovery, and maybe he remembers these emails, and maybe he is just flat out lying, and he is exposing himself in that way as well. But it also may be that he hasn't familiarized himself with all of the volumes of material yet. So this is the risk, this is the peril of trying to get out in front like this to remove the case. And I think prosecutors are only showing a fraction of what they have on various issues so that they can prepare a trial to use this testimony against him.
There's an argument circulating about whether the 14th Amendment that prohibits anyone, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion from holding public office bars Trump from running for president. Now, this hasn't been tested in our system before. Do you think, what is your thought on whether that's a valid argument?
I think it is a valid argument. The 14th Amendment, Section 3, is pretty clear. If you engage in acts of insurrection or rebellion against the government, or you give aid and comfort to those who do, you are disqualified from running. It doesn't require that you be convicted of insurrection. It just requires that you have engaged in these acts. It's a disqualification from holding office again, and it fits Donald Trump to a T. I think this will be tested when a Secretary of State either refuses to put him on the ballot or puts him on the ballot and is challenged by a litigant. I would imagine it will go up to the Supreme Court, and that's the big question mark through all of this, which is, what will the Supreme Court do? There are prominent constitutional scholars as well as prominent progressive scholars who believe that he should be disqualified. But will the court take that step? Ultimately, only time will tell. But I do think it is a very legitimate issue. By the clear terms of the 14th Amendment, he should be disqualified from holding office.
Congress is not returning for a couple of weeks, but Republicans are already ramping up talk of an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Here's what Marjorie Taylor Greene recently said.
I will not vote to fund the government unless we have passed an impeachment inquiry on Joe Biden.
Now, shutting the government down has implications on the public broadly. What is your reaction to her tying a government shutdown to an impeachment inquiry?
Well, it just shows the extreme lengths they'll go to carry water for Donald Trump. They'll shut down the government. They'll do whatever they can to initiate an impeachment of Joe Biden. And part of the motivation here is, of course, to distract from Donald Trump's multiple indictments. Part of it is to somehow try to dilute the stain of Trump's impeachments. But the common denominator is this just unswerving, undeniable willingness to debase themselves in the service of Donald Trump. I think that many of them would like to shut down the government anyway. This will just give them further leverage to try to shut down the government. Having failed to default on the nation's credit, many see this as the next demonstration of their commitment to God knows what. So I fear that we're on a path to government shutdown because there are enough members of the Republican conference who want it, and Kevin McCarthy will do whatever it takes to remain Speaker one more day or one more week. That's his sole motivation.
Congressman Adam Schiff, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.